it is NATO which provides hard power, and if you're looking for hard power, that's where your partnership is. That's the question.
I just like to say a few words in response to the lady from the Ministry of Justice, because I think you asked a pretty fundamental and important question. How do you transform society? And I think that what I'm saying in essence is that you cannot rely on the European Union to transform society for you. And I don't think you can rely simply on governments in the centre to transform society for you. What I'm saying is that the process of transformation, it is very much a process, has to be about partnership. It has to be about partnership for people working at different levels. But I think the most important element in that partnership, in a modern democracy, is the actual people. It's the citizens themselves. They themselves have got to want to change and be the practical agents of transformation. That's why I think it's important to see the state as an enabling framework, not as a state which determines what people have to do, provides the framework for them to be effective. And also I think it's important to define democracy, not in terms of democracy full stop, but in terms of participation. Because, you know, if I was critical of many so-called mature democracies in Europe, the idea is that people go to ballot boxes, voting stations every few years, put across them to politicians, and then the politicians do this, that and the other, and if people don't think they've done a good job, they put the ballot boxes again and vote them out and get another lot of politicians. That's important, but democracy is so much more than that. It is about people themselves participating in their communities, and actually defining what priorities they have in between elections as well as after elections. And that kind of culture of participation, which I think is absolutely vital in a modern society to bring about the transformation that you want to see.
Just to quickly follow up, on the role of the states promoting social transition in society, I think that the point David made in his opening remarks about the decentralization of power is very key here. I think the role of the state, which I think was the specific question that was asked, is to create an environment where people are free to choose how they want to live, as long as it doesn't infringe on anyone else's individual liberty, where people can make personal choices and be accountable for these choices. And that is going to be done not only on a national government level, but also on a local government level, on a community level, and also on a family level. But the role of the government is to make sure that that is allowed to happen. And just briefly, I can't resist the low-hanging fruit and commenting on the individual, the gentleman's perceived fear here. I'm not Georgia, I've never lived here. I have traveled here regularly and I follow events here very closely. And from an outsider's point of view, I'll simply say that you do see on television the protests that occasionally happen. You don't see any of the brutality that's normally associated with other countries, maybe in the region, trying to squash these protests. As far as I can tell, people do have freedom of expression, and I'm also sorry for anyone who fears having freedom of expression, no matter where in the world they are.
I just want to react to what David and Luke said about the societies, and I have the impression that in Georgia we have very active people, politically speaking. People who are very much involved in different political parties or NGOs, but very few people involved in social activities, like just non-lucrative social activity, people who go and to work and to help people who help their neighbors, the people that are more vulnerable. And this is also the fact, maybe because we are not totally European society. And again, about this fear, when I was a kid, I was always afraid of being in a dark room. I thought it was something terrible. I went there once, I was like 5 or 6 years old, and I started to count from 0 to 10. And then ran out, and nothing happened. The next day I did it from 0 to 20, then 0 to 30. And then I went to the room and stayed like 5 minutes and nothing happened. So please speak up, and you will see that nothing will happen. And that's...
Okay, so we have some questions from this side. So the gentleman at the back.
On human rights in Russia, say that if Mr. Putin comes to the London Olympics, he might face arrest and questioning. So very intelligently, he's decided not to come to the London Olympics. So, and I have to say that was done without the help of the British government, because our Foreign Secretary and Prime Minister are very silent on human rights issues publicly. That's entirely across party group MPs, Conservatives as well as others involved in this. So I'm afraid the Olympic Games will have to take place without Mr. Putin's presence. London can bear the sacrifice. Now, but what this point is that when we talk about Eastern neighbourhood partnerships, the real thing that worries me is the extent to which Europe's Eastern neighbourhood is turning away from the West. We're seeing it profoundly in Russia, we're seeing it in Belarus, of course, we're seeing it in Ukraine with the Tymoshenko affair. Are we seeing it in Turkey, where Turkish airline workers had to go on strike, not for a pay claim, but because the Erdogan government was seeking to ban the right to strike. And the right to strike is a fundamental European international democratic right. Now, Georgia's got an extraordinary chance to profile itself in this very difficult era for Europe as the most western part of the eastern end of Europe, if I can put it like that. To uphold media freedoms, political plurality, to ensure there aren't any horrible attacks on gay people, to join with Europe in common diplomatic initiatives. Georgia's a sovereign state. It can work with the United Nations, it can work with the Council of Europe, it can work with partners. For example, in Serbia, the new president, Mr. Nikolic, he too is rejecting the West by saying Russia is now Serbia's best friend. Serbia can join a new Eurasian federation rather than the EU. And of course, he said he won't recognise Kosovo. And Georgia can become part of the West by recognising Kosovo, by aligning itself consistently and clearly in a very principled way with the broad thrust of Western values. Georgia's very American, it's the George W. Bush Boulevard, it's not the statue of Ronald Reagan. Is there a Place Bourbon? Do we see the European flag flying here often enough? There are all sorts of signals that Georgia can send to itself that as part of social transformation is by adopting Western values, defending the West, adopting European values and norms and ideas. It's a magnificent chance for Georgia to lift itself up above the other countries in Eastern Partnerships, where there's a lot of concern that they're turning their back on the West.